Hello everyone, thanks for joining us today for a topic that we're really excited about, Sales Enablement Must-Dos. And without any further ado, here's our VP of Marketing, Brian Fravel.
Thanks, Candy. Welcome everyone. Sales enablement is obviously a huge topic and we could spend 24 hours talking about it. And so what we've tried to do in this webinar is kind of distill it down to the must-dos. And you'll see here as we go through the content, we've phased it because we realize that different companies are at different phases of instituting sales enablement processes and tools and et cetera. And just before we jump into it, I was just looking at some recent statistics from Aberdeen, and the research they have is about 68% of large enterprises have implemented some form of sales enablement, 55% of medium, and then when you get down to small business, it's 38%. So even when you look at large enterprise, there's still a good third that really haven't implemented a formal sales enablement program. So before we kick off the agenda, we'll go through a quick definition because, of course, sales enablement is one of those terms that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And then we'll spend most of the time on this sales enablement adoption framework that we've put together that will hopefully help guide you on some of the must-dos depending on where you sit. We'll end with a couple traps to avoid, and then if you have any questions, you can type in the questions in the question box there in the WebEx screen, and we will get to as many of them as we can. So let's jump in. What is sales enablement? So what I decided to do is pull a couple quotes and see what others thought first. And so Forrester here has an interesting one. I like the phrase there, have a valuable conversation. So you remember the whole purpose of sales enablement is to help your sales force, and your sales force is going to have a conversation, and so there's a lot of things that go into that, but at the end of the day, if you go in with the mindset of how am I going to help my salesperson have a better conversation? IDC hits on another point here which I think is important, which is the delivery of the right information. So oftentimes the conversation your sales rep is going to have is going to be supported by some sort of content, and getting that content to them exactly when they need it at the right moment is a key piece of it. For this conversation, the way I want to look at it is it's really about processes, tools, training, and coaching, and our ultimate goal with sales enablement is to help our sales reps perform better, and that perform better maybe hit quota, exceed quota, reduce sales cycle. There's a lot of things, but at the end of the day, we're talking about more sales. And so that's what, as we go through the framework, that's the mindset we have. Now, common problems that we hear all the time from customers and partners are things like the statistics you see here. Sales reps can't find content, or they're wasting time looking for content. Only 30% of the marketing content is produced is actually used. And that may be because they can't find it, or it may be because of the quality. The scary one up in the top right-hand corner, 42% of sales reps they don't feel prepared before calling prospects. That's kind of scary because you think about the lost opportunity there. And then the serious decisions quote in the bottom left is the number one reason sellers miss quota is because they can't articulate value. So back to the definition and the Forrester quote, how do we help people have better conversations so they can articulate value and they are prepared going into that sales conversation? So if you look at it simply, there's two primary benefits of sales enablement, and I think too often people associate sales enablement with the left side and productivity, which is an important piece of it. But that piece of it is all about cutting costs or efficiencies. So we're looking to save reps time or save marketing time. We're looking to reduce waste. If we go back to that last slide, we just talked about 30% of marketing content is used. There's clearly 70% of the marketing content. Maybe it's not always, but a lot of it is waste. There's process efficiencies. How long does it take to get something done? Is a sales rep spending more time on administrative tasks than they should be versus core selling activities? And then there's also improving internal alignment. I mean, there are many organizations where sales and marketing are almost two separate countries speaking a different language. The piece that I don't see enough companies focusing on, and I think there's great opportunity, and we're going to talk about it a little more, is performance side. And on performance, this is how can we sell more? If you think about it, you know, productivity will help you on the bottom line, but it's not going to necessarily help you on the top line. Performance is going to help you on your top line and help you grow revenue. And the things you can do within sales enablement could be finding more prospects, closing more deals and doing it faster, quota achievement. And so as you build out your own sales enablement program and processes and tools, I think it's really important to make sure you have a mix of both. Your job is not just to cut costs, it's to cut costs and grow the top line revenue. Okay, so I'm going to introduce a framework, and then in this framework we're going to go through different phases, and what we hope to do is that you can figure out about what phase you're at, and then you can follow kind of this playbook of must-dos. So let me introduce the framework first. Again, trying to distill this down into something simple, key elements of a sales enablement program. You have processes, you have an organizational structure, or at least organizational ownership. It's very possible that if you're a small business, you can't afford a sales enablement team, but that doesn't mean that organizationally you can't assign that responsibility to someone. There is the content that goes along with the sales process. And then obviously, especially today, there's technology. And there's a lot of technology choices out there in the marketplace. It's really exploded in the last 5 years. And you know, it's interesting because sales is really the last function within the enterprise organization for the technology wave to finally hit. If you think about it, back office automation, you know, payroll, things like that, that happened back in the 50s. You had the ERP and SAP, you know, SAPs of the world implementing ERP systems in the 80s. Probably within the last decade, marketing automation tools have hit marketing, but it's taken a while for technology to catch up and start to transform sales. And I think we're now on that wave. And if you aren't starting to look at the sales tech landscape, I encourage you to. And at the end, we'll talk about a webinar we're coming up where we're going to help demystify that daunting task. At the center of all this, and don't lose sight of this, is people are at the center of your solution. And one of the mistakes that we see, especially on the technology side, is companies will bring in a cool bells and whistles technology platform that's hard to use, doesn't fit into a seller's workflow, and the result they get is almost no adoption by their sales teams, and then they wonder why they're failing. So as you implement any of these things, you have to ask yourself, am I helping my sales force sell better? And am I creating a team that is going to work together? Sales, marketing, sales enablement, et cetera. People are at the center of these solutions. So here's a framework that we're going to lay out, and then, as I said, we're going to go through phases, and you can decide which phase your company is at, and then we have some recommendations on the must-dos. But let's talk just at a high level. So the process, content, technology, organization across the top. When I say processes, these are the things, and you could certainly argue I could have put more pillars here, but I wanted to try to keep it simple. So under processes, I put things like onboarding, training, ongoing training, or new product launch training is another common use case. There's coaching of the sales rep. There's also, remember, coaching of the sales managers. Coaches need coaching as well. There is the whole lead scoring and handoff process, so a handoff from marketing to sales, and do you have a service level agreement there? And then, of course, there is a ton that can be done in measurements and even analytics. On the content side, there's an auditing function. There's the process of aligning it to sales. So, and by that I mean if whatever your sales stages are, do you have content that align to the sales stages or buyer's journey, if you want to look at that from the buyer's point of view. And then there's the delivery of content. How do I get content from my marketing team to my sales team so they can use it, and how do I do it in a fast, efficient way and a way in which it gets them when they need it. On the technology side, you have information capture. So for something like that, I think this CRM, you capture information about your prospects as well as contact points, meeting notes, etc. There's automation. So one example is marketing automation, but it could also be call automation. There are a couple platforms out there to help your sales development reps be more efficient by using technology to call. There's a whole bunch of analytics, especially from the marketing automation platforms. And then kind of looking a little bit more on the cutting edge and where I think the future will go are predictive technologies. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. On the organization side, there's the very simple question, who owns sales enablement? As I mentioned before, in a small organization, maybe that's a marketing team that has multiple roles. In a large enterprise, you may have a full-blown sales enablement organization. It doesn't really matter how you organize. What's important is that someone has a defined role. There's resources and budget. So if you're paying lip service to sales enablement, but you're not resourcing it, you're not going to get very far. And then there's the role definition. And by that, I'm really thinking of what does sales do, what does marketing do? If you have a sales enablement organization, what does the sales enablement organization do? And how do all of those organizations work together? And oftentimes what we see is organizations put together a service level agreement so everybody knows what they're supposed to do. When it's written down, it makes it a lot clearer. So there's the basic framework that we're going to go through in a second. And then to keep it simple, a phase 1, 2, 3 maturity model. And so phase 1 is an organization that sees the value, has begun establishing a formal sales enablement program. As I mentioned before, it doesn't have to be a formal organization, it's a function that's going to be resourced. The second phase is you have a sales enablement function in place, but you're probably missing some of the elements. And then the third phase would be you're all on your way to world class. And I think a key differentiator here is you're taking advantage of technology. As I mentioned before, sales is one of the last functions within the enterprise organization that is finally adopting technology and using it to its fullest extent. So let's take those two, and we'll start with phase 1. And here's an example end state. So a state in which you can say, hey, I'm on my way to sales enablement. So under processes, things that I think are key, formalized onboarding and training. Without a formalized process, ad hoc, you probably have sales reps who can articulate value. You probably have a ton of different ways your value proposition is being articulated, because without a formal onboarding and an ongoing training program, you're just not going to get the consistency you need. Other things, and critical if marketing and sales are going to work together, is lead scoring and handoff. Need to have it written down. How are we going to score leads? That needs to be agreed upon by marketing and sales, and you're going to hear this theme a lot. Marketing and sales alignment is probably one of the key things, and I probably should have put that as a takeaway. If you do nothing else, first make sure you have marketing and sales aligned. And then based on the scoring, you have a handoff process. And then phase 1, you're probably measuring activities, not results. And what I mean by that is how many leads did I generate. Maybe you're looking at MQL to SQL conversion, but you're still at this stage having a hard time attributing marketing activities to specific revenue. And we'll talk about what other phases, how that changes. In content, you need to define content repositories. Often if you're a middle or medium or large size organization, you probably have more than one repository, which isn't necessarily bad, but you have some place to store that. And as I mentioned before, no phase can happen without sales and marketing alignment. On the technology side, CRM usage, marketing automation usage, those two systems talking to each other. And then some sort of marketing efficiency metrics. So here you can start to look at, okay, what content is being used. You can do things like we talked about earlier on the efficiency side and start cutting costs and reducing waste, but you haven't gotten to the point where it's easy to attribute marketing activities to revenue yet. From an organizational standpoint, you've established some ownership and you have a budget. Again, if you don't have a budget, it's kind of hard to get a lot of this going. So the must-dos to get to that end state: align sales and marketing. You got to agree on objectives, roles and responsibilities, how you're going to hand off leads, how you're going to score leads. And this can't be marketing handing it to sales and saying, here's what we're going to do. This has to be a joint effort, the most important thing in any of these phases. You have to assign ownership and resources. So if you're committed, there needs to be heads and dollars to do it, even if it's not a formal organization. The key support functions: onboarding, training, and coaching. You have to minimum things you have to do there to support your reps. Consolidate your content. At least have systems of record. Maybe it's great if you can get it all down to one repository. Often in large organizations, that's just not feasible. But as long as you know which ones are the right ones, and then establish basic technology usage, and CRM and marketing automation are the two obvious ones. So fairly basic stuff in phase one. Now when we get to phase two, the end state gets a little bit more mature. So you have a formal onboarding process. So oftentimes companies will do something like 30 days, very defined things, what you do in week 1, week 2, week 3, et cetera. And it's repeatable, and every new sales rep goes through the same onboarding process. There's a formal training program, so it's not ad hoc. Oh, geez, we have a product launch, we need to do training. Of course you do, but what about sales skills, ongoing reinforcement of your sales methodology, things like that? And then there's a formal coaching program, and you're measuring these things. So you're tracking them in some sort of way, whether it's simply completion. Did you take the training? Have you received coaching, at least one formal coaching once a quarter, whatever your metrics may be, but you're tracking those kinds of things. You have your lead scoring and handoff completely documented, and then you're using technology here to start to show marketing attribution. And oftentimes, organizations will say something like marketing-assisted revenue. So we know that we shared that white paper, and then we closed that deal. You may not know exactly how many deals or how the true ROI of that white paper, but you start to know which pieces of marketing content are helping to assist move things through the sales funnel and even to revenue. On the content side, again, you have the content repositories. Sales and marketing are aligned, and now content is delivered via the repository or some sort of, oftentimes a sales portal is created. And this allows you to deliver the latest and greatest, most recent branded message, etc. So if I'm a salesperson, I want to make sure I have the latest sales deck, I go to this place and it's always going to be the latest and greatest. Might even have notifications to me about when things change so I can update whatever I'm using. From a technology standpoint, in this phase, we see companies using good CRM usage. So sometimes companies will talk to them and they have a CRM, but when we ask about usage, it's like, yeah, not really. They're not very good about keeping an update. In this phase, it's important for that data to be up to date, and there's diligence on the sales force to input information, meeting notes, etc. Same with on the marketing automation. You're using marketing automation to score leads, to nurture prospects. You have content on the marketing side that's helping that. And then you also are using analytics so that you can change your tactics based on what's working and what's not. Organizationally, there is a formal sales enablement role. That could be one person in a small company, but they have the title of sales enablement or something like that. Might be a small team at a mid-size or enterprise. Budget probably increases here depending on what you can afford, and then you have roles that are defined in staff. So things like that, someone's probably responsible for training and onboarding. Someone's probably responsible for coaching. There's someone that's probably looking at content. Now, again, that may not be 4 individual people, that may be one person, but those are the tasks that are well defined. So to get through this phase, the must-dos, organizations need to start looking at onboarding and ongoing training as a strategic asset and critical investments that need to be made. Same with formal coaching. And you monitor it. We've seen a lot of companies monitor with some sort of reward system. So managers actually, their compensation is tied to, are they doing it on a regular basis, whatever they decide the frequency should be. The lead scoring and handoff, you're reviewing it on a regular basis. Quarterly probably makes sense for a lot of organizations. It's not, okay, we decided it 18 months ago and we never change it. We all know it's a dynamic environment, and so looking at your process and the handoff and optimizing that on a regular basis, again, this is sales and marketing together, is important. Companies here are auditing their content, and they're making sure that they align their content to the sales stages or the buyer's journey, depending on how you want to look at it. Oftentimes what we see is marketers tend to gravitate to the top of the funnel, so get some leads, but there's not as much content, which is critical for the sales team to move things through the funnel. So if you're in this stage, I would encourage you to do a really deep dive audit and see where you land. If you haven't done one, I'd be willing to bet you're going to find that you're very heavy on the top of the funnel. Companies here will start to use some adjacent technologies to augment the CRM and marketing automation, and that could be things like learning management systems, content management systems, and then there's also sales productivity tools. I talked about some of the calling tools. There's other tools like Sales Loft, which will help organize the sales rep, tell them who to call, when to follow up, reminders, things of that nature. So there's a lot of different tools. Many of them plug into the CRM or even the marketing automation platform. And then companies here are making strategic investments in sales enablement. So they're looking at places where they want to get better, where they can have a competitive advantage, and they're actually investing ahead of the curve. So finally then, phase 3, which is kind of the cutting edge. And when you look at onboarding, of course, it's everything phase 2, but more. So onboarding and training programs, it's not just one-time events. So many companies will have an onboarding program, 30 days, and then it's best of luck, hope you hit quota. But remember, we don't learn in just short bursts. So having ongoing reinforcement, short micro-learning type bursts, and using technology to deliver that is important. Same with ongoing training, whether it's sales methodology or product launch training. If you're doing product launch trainings in a 1-hour webinar and then hoping everybody remembers what you said, you're in trouble, because when we learn like that, most of what you learn is forgotten within 30 days. And so some sort of ongoing reinforcement is important to make sure that people are retaining the knowledge that you're giving them in those trainings. Companies in this phase are using technology for a virtual coach. Many sales teams are dispersed geographically. You can't have a manager face-to-face all the time. There are a lot of technologies that can be used so you get virtual coaching, and you can even get virtual coaching the moment you need it. They're starting to use technology for predictive lead scoring, and this is really interesting. Now you can start to predict based on a number of factors. We could do a whole webinar on this alone. on which prospects should I call first and which are most likely to turn into an opportunity and eventually a sale. And again, with the data available today, there's some really awesome stuff you can do here. And then the measurement now, you start to get to a piece of content when you have technology and you're integrated with a marketing automation system and CRM, you can start to attribute specific marketing actions to actual sales or moving through the sales funnel. So as a marketer like myself, it's great to go to the CFO and say, hey, I can show you how much revenue we've generated with this piece of content. You can show true ROI. On the content side, it's predictive content delivery. So rather than your salesperson going, okay, I'm calling on a VP of marketing at an automotive company, where's my content? You can use technology to predictively recommend exactly what they need, exactly when they want it. Saves the salesperson a whole lot of time. You know they're getting the right piece of content for the sales opportunity at the right moment. And here, sales and marketing are working together, so you kind of have, joint rewards and goals when it comes to usage of content, delivery of content, and sales. Technology, like I mentioned, predictive technology, there's a lot, and there's predictive for prospects, there's predictive for lead prioritization. I mentioned earlier predictive for content. So with the amount of data and machine learning algorithms available in the tech landscape, there's a lot of things you can do to take the guesswork out of what content do I use and who do I call, when do I call. And then finally, organizationally, you elevate sales enablement to kind of the VP level at a larger enterprise that will look like a VP of sales enablement, who will sit there with other vice presidents and be equal at the table. And then you're budgeting based on strategic revenue initiatives. We need to achieve revenue in, say, a new marketplace. You use sales enablement as one of your tools. You don't just throw salespeople at it and marketing collateral at it, but you actually have a sales enablement initiative backed by these technologies that I talked about. So the must-dos, you have to elevate sales enablement within the organization and make it a strategic function. I think that's probably key in this phase. This is really where you need to invest in the technologies I talked about, whether it's predictive virtual coaching. And there's also opportunity here as you're delivering content to the sales rep to deliver the coaching alongside the content, because let's be honest, no sales rep is going to read that white paper, but if you have a short little coaching play along with it that tells them, here are the key messages, here's how to position it, that they will read. Post-reinforcement for your ongoing training and onboarding are really, really important. And then you need to start measuring specific content impact to sales funnel and ultimately sales. And this is, earlier I talked about measuring activities versus results. This is measuring the results of your marketing, not just the activities that you're doing. So hopefully those three phases and the must-dos were helpful as you go through this journey. One last thing is traps to avoid. And first one we see people do a lot. They get excited, they go at it, and they bite off more than they can chew. There's nothing wrong with doing this in a staged, phased approach. Go for small wins. Don't try to boil the ocean and then build on your small wins. I mentioned it up front, I can't say it enough. If you're not aligning sales and marketing, you are likely to fail. It's both the lead, scoring, and handoff process, but it's also what content does the sales team need by stage. It's measuring, the trap to avoid is measuring just activities and not the results. Try to measure marketing impact to revenue whenever possible, because at the end of the day, that's what we're all trying to achieve. If you have no feedback loop, so if sales can't say, hey, this piece of content isn't working, and there's no formal process, it's likely going to break down over time. And if your marketing content isn't aligned to your sales training or your sales methodology, you're going to have a problem, and sales isn't going to use it. And that kind of leads me down to that last bullet there too, which is marketing should be included in sales training. Marketing should know what sales is being trained on, so when they develop the content, they can align it to the sales training. And then finally, if you don't have a sales methodology or playbooks, putting the systems and all that will help, but not having a systematic, repeatable way for your sales reps to get the message and articulate value and figure out customer pain points won't make you as successful as you could be. So I hope with that, that was helpful. Again, it was meant to be an overview and get you started. And I'll turn it back over to Candy to talk about some other tools that we have that may be of use to you.
All right, thanks, Brian. As you can see, we're running just a touch late. If you have any questions at all, feel free to email us, marketing@veeloinc.com, and we will be sure to get back to you. We mentioned briefly demystifying the sales tech stack earlier in this webinar, and that's going to be in 2 weeks. You should sign up. It's going to be a fascinating topic that we don't really honestly see very much talked about these days. And then visit our resources page if you're interested in more resources, veeloinc.com/resources. We will have a link to the recording and to this deck to all of you registrants by tomorrow. Anyway, thanks so much for attending, everybody, and have a great day. Bye.